Hi, I'm Toby.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And welcome to the Pure Property Podcast with Track Capital, where we talk about all things property and property investment. So the aim of the podcast is to give you our industry insight and knowledge and to help investors to invest intelligently. So I've got Matt along with me this week and hopefully going to be a regular occurrence for you being on the podcast. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Toby.
All good, all good. So this week's episode, we're going to look at some of the articles that have come out recently that have caught our attention, which we'll briefly go over and give our opinion on. And then we're going to go over and discuss the Renters Reform Bill, which is something that a lot of our listeners, our clients and people in the property industry would have been hearing a lot about. So we thought we would go over it, highlight some of the main points from it, give our insight and take on the bill itself, and give our opinion on what we think it will be like for the property market, where everything they're saying to come in to actually come in. So let's start with some of the articles that we've noticed this week, Matt. Now, one of the articles that I wanted to come across first is Labour recently announcing, good old Sir Keir Starmer, saying that they would look to abolish leasehold in the UK within the first 100 days of them coming into power. Now, what was your take on that article itself?
Yeah, obviously a very interesting article that they put out there. Obviously something that we hear a lot about, the whole freehold, leasehold type of thing all the time, especially ourselves dealing with property, with both leasehold and freehold properties on a day-to-day basis. It's definitely something that I think is an interesting topic. Everyone has their take on it. Some people are very kind of adamant that one is better than the other, but as a whole I do think it would actually be a good thing. I think in total, I think as a whole it's something that, as I said, I feel as though people feel as though they have a lot of freedom when they have the freehold, rather than kind of, even though there's not as much pressure applied to the leasehold, I think a lot of people, maybe an outsider's point of view who haven't dealt with a leasehold before, they maybe feel like it is a lot more pressure to do certain things a certain way, etc., which it's not completely. But yeah, it's something that I do think will be a good thing in the future if they do obviously look to implement it. But yeah, definitely as a whole, from my point of view, I think it is a good thing. I think it would open up many doors in the property world. I mean, what's your thoughts as a whole, Toby, on that?
Look, I'm all for it. There's definitely a stigma, like you mentioned, around the whole leasehold thing.
Absolutely.
Like, a lot of people are put off by it. Not that I think it's anything too negative. That said, only positive potentially can come from getting rid of the old leasehold, because I think we're the only country in the whole world that still has that way of doing things in property. So yeah, a positive overall if they were to do it. I'm a bit skeptical in the logistics of it. I mean, they say they would come in and abolish it in 100 days. Like, there's no substance behind how they would do it. How would that work? There's a lot to be done around that. The one positive I do think, and hence why I'm definitely all for it, and I think it's a great idea, is if it was done properly, I think it would definitely open up the market a lot more.
I agree.
Because you've got a lot of first-time buyers maybe, or investors, some that are put off by that stigma or don't understand it completely, and it can be quite confusing, or have maybe had bad experiences where from freeholders or management companies that they don't have control over. So I think that would massively help the market. But yeah, time will tell. It's one of those headlines which I'm sure will help them gain some votes, but like all of these things politicians do, it's all great saying it, but how are you going to do it?
Absolutely.
And would you even do it?
As you said there, Toby, to be honest, it's one of those things that I do think it would massively, as we deal with that on a day-to-day basis, I think it would massively open up the market in terms of also people, not purely for investment, but also residential wise, feeling as though they have a sense of control over their property rather than feeling restricted, I guess, in a leasehold, which, as I said, it's not, I think, what it's made out to be. But I do think it'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, so just for our listeners or viewers as well, abolishing the leasehold would mean that when you buy a property, you wouldn't be you would have control over the freehold or share freehold, however they would structure it. So then you would have control over how the building's looked after. So from my understanding, again, it's very vague. You would have control, and then you can see where your money's being spent on the service charge and where the money's being put towards to. So it's all done, and you're not being, maybe some people have been screwed over in the past with management companies maybe putting money incorrectly into the building or using companies which are more expensive. So basically giving yourself, when you buy a property, the control over it. And I'm assuming, again, then lease lengths would go, which is something we see a lot of, especially with the lower lease lengths.
They can then, I guess, allocate the funds where it is absolutely necessary rather than being spent sometimes, which probably is the case in some areas where maybe it's not always spent in the right place.
Yeah, no, I agree on that. So yeah, let's see if, well, one, they've got to get into power to do that.
Of course.
So and two, if they actually do it when they get into power. Another headline. So this one is from the IFA magazine. So a lot of other publications picked this up as well, but it was Rightmove showing the figures for asking prices rising by 1.8% in May. So yeah, asking prices up. Reading that, when you've heard about that, or maybe you've got feedback from people that you're speaking to, what was your take on that article and what your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a whole, with that increase, I think it's a positive sign within the market. I think within the market conditions, it's definitely one that's sparked a lot of interest over the past 6 to 12 months as a whole in terms of how it's performing. Some people are really put off by it. Some people aren't. Some people think obviously the market's going to crash, etc. As the article does mention, though, it is on what people are asking for rather than obviously properties that are actually sold at that price. So as a whole, I think it's a positive sign within the market. Obviously, we know certain areas within the market as well are obviously going to be performing better than others, but as a whole, I think it was quite a positive outlook on that. And I believe as well, Toby, when we post this, etc., obviously put some links to these articles so the viewers can listen in and actually tune in and have a look at the articles themselves.
Yeah, we will do that. And just on that, yeah, like you picked up on, it is a positive in a sense that asking prices are up 1.8%. But then one thing you have to do is just put it into context, because it is asking prices, not sold prices. Sure. This is asking prices. So the reason I see it as a bit of confidence is because, hopefully confidence for the right reason is potentially vendors are seeing the market, or even estate agents that are advising them slightly better than they'd initially thought. So they're feeling confident enough to put their asking prices up because that's what properties are achieving in the local area. And yeah, they're just seeing that the market isn't as bad as maybe they first presumed. So it's sort of pushing those asking prices up. Or maybe they're being ill-advised and estate agents trying to win business are putting the asking prices up. But I would hope it's not the latter, and I would take it as a good sign of positivity in the market. Now, if we actually look at property prices, so the data doesn't come out as frequently as in or up to date as that. For example, that's covering what we saw. That's for May, or showing May, and that was released, whereas land registry data is months behind because you have to wait for that to come through. Land registry data, the latest one goes up to March, and that shows that prices year on year have increased 4.1%. So that is a year. Remember, again, for context, that's a year-on-year growth. So we are seeing a slowdown in the capital price growth, which was naturally going to happen. And this is something we have spoken about so many times on this podcast, is that the market we experienced during COVID times was just ridiculous. There was no way that was going to last. It was unsustainable. We're now seeing this come to a more level, more stable market pre-pandemic. So we're looking, us as a company and a lot of people in the industry, instead of comparing today's market to between 2020 and 2022, we're actually looking at it compared to 2019 and prior, because that was a more stable, more normal market. So that's how we're doing our comparisons. And if we do those comparisons, which you won't do now because there is a new home track report that I believe has come out actually today, and I haven't had my eyes run over it yet, but we'll probably be talking about that on the next episode, and that will be showing us some data and we can use for comparison. But yeah, I'll use my optimistic head and take that as positivity, that people are feeling like they can get their asking price up. So it's good from our point of view. I agree. Now, again, onto another article. This one's from Property Industry Eye. And they are reporting, well, not them, the ONS are reporting that rents are on the rise. So rental prices are going up, and actually, I wouldn't say surprisingly, but to some people's surprise, London actually leading the way in England on that side of things. So London actually jump in, and this covers 12 months prior, April 2023, so year on year for April. So London's actually jumped up by 5% in terms of rental prices, which again is good, very, very strong. And the UK as a whole, on average, is 4.8%. So that is good.
It's an impressive stat.
It is very impressive. Now, you being a landlord, investor, what is that? Obviously, it's good news, but what do you take on that?
Absolutely. I think as a whole, with rents increasing over time frame, of course, as you mentioned, Toby, there's certain areas that will perform better than others. But as a whole, seeing in the market conditions a 4.8% increase across the whole of the UK market, I think that's a great sign for landlords, for sure. Definitely number one. Maybe not so much a great sign for people renting.
Yeah.
But of course, as a whole, though, I do think it's something that is consistently happening. What we're seeing at the moment with the market conditions, etc. Obviously, inflation, mortgage rates, a little bit of uncertainty there within the market. I think, if anything, it kind of gives that landlord's assurance that it is still profitable to go into property, and there is still really good opportunities within the market. Wherever you be in the country, of course, certain areas, as mentioned, are going to be better than others. But for example, I mean, we look at the data all the time from Home Track, and we know, for example, over the past year or so, in certain other areas, it's been a little bit higher. Obviously, some areas have been a little bit less to obviously stable at that 4.8%. So I think from a landlord's point of view, it's impressive, and fingers crossed, we will hope to see that can obviously take place and keep continuing to take place, because the amount of regeneration and money being pumped into certain cities, for sure, is only going to keep benefiting this. And obviously, a lot of the time, I was actually quite surprised that London was that high. I mean, look, I think as a whole, certain areas we know there's regeneration plans set in place, so it tends to naturally have the capital growth as well as the rental increase over that period of time. But obviously London, as an area that is very well developed already, it was quite an interesting stat to see that.
Yeah, but not really a surprise. We've seen an influx of demand going back to city centre locations because people are going back to normal ways of life.
Yeah.
The
post-COVID,
the need for space has run its course to a degree. Don't get me wrong, people do want more space, but I think now people are back to work on a more normal basis. Yeah. Location is key, and being sort of, especially London, where employment is so strong, people want to be close to where they're working. I think also London, so you're close to work, so that helps with costs. We're in a cost of living crisis. So yes, obviously you're maybe paying a bit more rent, but then if you're cutting on your travel costs, you're more than likely getting an apartment. And if it's fairly new, then you're actually saving on the costs of heating and all your usual utilities because they're cheaper to run, smaller properties. And just across the board, we are seeing that with apartments now, with cost of living going up. People are actually looking at apartments because they're saying, well, actually, it's cheaper to run, they're new, they're smaller.
The facilities as
well. And yeah, you can easily go out and walk in a park somewhere now, as long as it's accessible. So we are seeing that. So I'm not surprised. And we have said what we were saying for a long time in this podcast, well, even during the pandemic, people will be going back to London. I think the other thing to take from rental prices increasing is people are seeing yields being squeezed a bit more at the moment, where we've had such an aggressive capital growth over the past couple of years. Now, what we're demonstrating, which again is a natural byproduct once the capital price market slows down, is rents starting to rise now. So we are going to see these yields start to creep back up. So this is why we say properties, medium to long-term investment. You can't look short-term. I'll be looking now going, great. Yes, capital growth is coming to more normal levels, but what I'm starting to see is rents are going up. And the more people are struggling to buy properties because, unfortunately, the cost of living, mortgage prices, etc., they are now turning to rent and saying, look, okay, we'll have to keep renting. Let's go into rental properties. Let's be pushed into that market, which is pushing more demand into the market. And obviously the supply we know is restricted across the board anyway. And that's only going to keep pushing rents out. And what we have to remember is they're only going to go up to a level that is affordable. So they will slow down at some point. I know there is the worry that people are spending too much on rent, but the whole time they can afford it, they will continue to rise. And it kind of polices itself, the rental market, because they'll only go as high as the market can pay. Yes, there will be some people at the bottom that might sort of be priced out, but majority of people, as long as they can afford it, they're going to pay those rents. But it's just maybe long-term effect on the property market. It could stall them going into the property market. So we always see this battle with the rental prices, capital growth, and renters, homeowners, etc. So it's not that surprising, but it's a natural part of the market where we see transition. So
for sure,
yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they continue to grow. But I've got no forecast that doesn't say they'll continue to increase, because I just think
no reason, right?
No, all the main fundamental driving factors, supply and demand, that's not changing anytime soon. So they're going to continue to creep up. So if you are an investor buying now, then yes, at this moment in time, maybe your yield isn't where you would ideally like it to be normally, but you should start to see that increase, which we've seen happen prior. We've seen people buy previously in previous markets and sit there, and now where they've held on to it for the medium to long term, then I'll sit there going, well, my yield's massive now.
Absolutely. We've just to kind of creep in there and mention, even from a client's perspective, I mean, we work with a number of clients on a day-to-day basis, and even we've had rental forecasts pre kind of completion, for example, with an off-plan property, and within 6 months the rents have increased. So by the time of completion, what they were looking at previously has already increased. So as a whole, that's only going to benefit the investor, because of course the rents are going up, which means their profit margin is going to increase, etc. So as a whole, for sure, I think especially in certain locations, it's a bit of a no-brainer, especially just going back to the part of the facilities within these buildings and what they're bringing, and why city centres are becoming so popular. It's because the facilities are, I mean, realistically, if you didn't want to, if you don't want to leave, you don't have to leave. They've got gyms, they've got some of them have got coffee shops. Yeah. You've literally got everything on your doorstep. So yeah, and I think a lot of people as well are loving the buzz, as you said, post-COVID, being able to be in the city, have the buzz. I think especially for a lot of young individuals, which I think a lot of working professionals in that kind of maybe 20 to 35 bracket, that's where a lot of the target audience will be. Of course, dependent on location, etc. But a lot of the clients that we kind of deal with, that's the kind of market that they'd be looking for rent-wise to come in there. And there's a massive turnover of people looking to rent at the moment, as you mentioned.
Yeah, that was a good point actually about the off-plan and the rents actually going up during that build period. We've got that one, and we've got the one in Bradford, for example, where even the yield was fairly strong anyway, and now we've revisited it because it's completion sort of later on this year, and we're actually being told, look, the rents have actually gone up quite a bit. So you're actually looking at better yield. So even on a conservative day, it's good news. And then with the current market conditions, so that's one of the benefits we speak about when buying off plan, of obviously securing at today's price. That price stays the same. But if capital growth takes place, you benefit from that. But one thing we probably don't shout enough about is we'll actually benefit from the rental price increase as well.
And we try to be conservative with those points at the beginning, looking at not overinflating the price from the get-go, because at the end of the day, that's not going to be with anyone's best interest. Obviously, putting higher figures on something that isn't going to achieve that. So, yeah, as you mentioned there, Toby, it's much more about, yes, you're buying an investment, but I think everyone buying off plan is very hard hitting on the fact of the capital growth and buying in the right location. But as mentioned, it's the rent that's going to increase over that time frame as well, especially within the right locations, which definitely where the regeneration areas are set and taking place at the moment. That is something that I think is massively going to be another benefit to buying off plan.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, there are the headlines then that have caught our eye. We'll keep an eye on the next ones that we'll use on the next episode. But yeah, we're always trying to stay in loop with what the headlines are saying and what it means for the market and how to interpret it. So yeah, we'll look forward to the next ones that we can speak about. Now on to the main part of this episode, the Renters Reform Bill. So for those that don't know what it is, so this was brought in originally in 2019. So this is a bill that is being put forward in Parliament, which its main aim is to increase security for renters, to increase standards for them as well. And there is also bits of it which would help potentially to increase how the landlords can get possession back of their property. Now, there has been a lot of uproar about this within the industry. So whenever this has been mentioned, because we've only just seen the details in the past few weeks, it's been spoken about for a long time, and there was a lot of rumours about what was going to be in there. As I said, this has been announced in 2019, and we've only seen it a couple of weeks ago in 2023. So yeah, a lot of speculation has taken place. Yeah, typical government delay and stuff. No, never. And yeah, we finally got it now. And initial reaction was uproar. Oh my God, it's bashing landlords. It's well in favour of tenants. This is
push landlords out the market.
Push landlords out the market. It's awful. It's awful. Now, yeah, that's what a lot of people have said. But what we will do now is we'll go through the main points of it. So, and just to give you sort of an overview of the bill, so the main points that have raised eyebrows and which we'll go over are the abolishing of Section 21, which we'll go into, the end of fixed term tenancies, changes to landlords' grounds for possession, the end of blanket bans on tenant demographics, renting to tenants with pets. That's a big one. We've heard that many, many times. The decent homes standards, a landlord portal and a requirement to join a new ombudsman scheme, and then changes to how rents are reviewed and increased. So, yeah, this is what we will go through. Now, just as a side note, this hasn't come into force yet. So I don't want listeners going, oh my God, what the hell is this? I've never even heard about this.
I'm not going to become a landlord.
Yeah,
anymore.
I'm not. Or hang on, I've got properties, and my letting agent hasn't told me this, and I knew nothing about this. No, this just to let you know, this hasn't come in yet. So there is an actual procedure and a way that this gets into actual everyday life and gets put in by law and legislation, etc. So they have to go through parliamentary readings. It then gets royal assent, then it's implemented by government, which is done in stages. So yeah, it's not in yet, and there may be a while before we actually see this come into force. So let's start with getting rid of Section 21. So Section 21 is a section used within the Housing Act part of legislation, which is how you can serve your tenant notice. So this is probably arguably one of the biggest changes which people have noted as part of the bill. So Matt, why don't you give your understanding of what Section 21 is?
Yeah, I think Section 21 was set in place quite a while ago now in regards to basically landlords having the right to be able to evict tenants without kind of needing a specific reason.
Yeah, exactly that. So they can basically get their property back without giving, like you said, any valid reason.
For sure. So yeah, that's something that I think is I think it would be, I'm not going to lie, I think I'll be with the uproar crowd here and think that would be one of the major points. I think if you're a landlord and it's your property, I do think you should have the ability to do what you want with it when you want, to be completely honest with you. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for renters and obviously looking after tenants, etc., and doing things the correct way. But I do believe the Section 21 would be, it would be a big miss unless they obviously looked to implement something else that was, I guess, similar or another way of doing it. But I think it would be a big loss if that was to go, to be honest. What about yourself, Toby?
Yes and no. I think when you first hear that, you think, oh my God, wow, I'm not going to be able to get my property back. But when you do read into it and you put it into context, they're getting rid of what you call no fault evictions. So it just means I want my property back, give it back. You give the tenant notice, they go. So it adds a bit of security and comfort to the tenants, and I can see why some landlords would be disappointed by that, of course. But then when you read into it, they are looking to then bolster the Section 8 grounds for getting your property back. So it's not like you're not going to have any chance to. It just means there has to be a valid reason for. So I believe they're going to add into there, for example, if you wanted to sell your property. There's a few. So just to give an update on Section 8, so what that is. So that, yeah, as I said, that's basically recovering your property for possession under specific reasons. So a Section 8 eviction is when your tenants are in breach of the tenancy agreement. So if they breach the tenancy agreement, this is what's going on. This is still what you could do now. You use Section 8 to get your property back. Unlike Section 21, so Section 8 eviction does require, obviously, the reasons for, like we just mentioned, and there's 17 possible grounds for eviction under Section 8, which includes things such as rent arrears, property damage, like we said, if they breach their contract, nuisance behaviour, if a landlord wants to live in their property. So if landlord's like, right, I need my property back because I'm going to be living in it now, I'm moving myself or I'm moving me and my family.
Reason,
yeah, a valid reason why they'd get the property back, and you can then serve notice.
Just to make people aware, this is still definitely in place.
So yeah, Section 8 you can use today. This is not
going anywhere.
No. So Section 8 is staying there, and they're actually looking to bolster that as well. So see, there's less. Well, the judge pretty much can't, as long as you've got a valid reason, the judge isn't going to say no. So with a Section 8, the landlords must serve the notice to tenants detailing the eviction grounds. So they have to serve that, and then if the tenant doesn't leave by a specific date, the landlord can then seek court intervention and get their property back. So that will be still there, and they will look to bolster those powers away. Now, I believe they're looking to add in. So they're looking to add in the grounds for possession being better. So, like I said, I think mentioning about if you want to sell your property, that would be a ground for possession there. But what also they're going to do alongside this, so with Section 8, is they're actually going to look at bolstering the court proceedings and the proceedings for how you get your property back, which again is a massive issue at the moment. People waiting so long. It's just completely broken.
Ridiculous, isn't it?
So again, this is one of those things, in theory, what they're saying, when you look at them abolishing Section 21, initially scary, but then actually, well, no, we've got Section 8, and if they bolster the Section 8 reasons, then it's actually not that bad. And if they then increase and make the efficiency better for the proceedings to get your property back, and they make that process a lot better, then it's not actually going to be affecting. I think one of the stats that I've got here is only 6% of tenants are evicted via Section 21.
Very small percentage, right?
Again, so realistically, why are you going to evict your tenant?
For sure. I mean, if they're paying every month, and you've got no issues with them,
why would you evict them? So when you think of it like that, you're actually like, well, that's actually not that much of an issue.
I do think it's one of those things where, as you said, the uproar initially when you first see
I can't get my property back.
it is scary. You think, oh my God, I'm going to have... You feel as though as a landlord you would be getting pushed out of the market and they're not happy and it's getting harder and harder. But I think when you look at it from another perspective, like you just mentioned there, Toby, I think it then opens up many other doors to think, actually, if they were to boost certain areas where you can do things with a valid reason, as you mentioned. Realistically, if your tenant's paying you, as mentioned in general, if your tenant's paying, there's no issues, then there's no real reason, unless you're selling your property or there is something to do with that, then I don't see why you would have any issues in the first place.
No, like I said, from my memory, I don't think I've ever asked, only when I've actually sold a property have I requested a tenant to leave. And they stayed in the property while the sale was going on, a couple of months left of the sale, and then they left. Apart from that, I don't know. And there's not been many cases where I've spoke to other landlords that have evicted their tenants.
Have you found anyone in the 6%?
A few. No, I have. Have I? No, I don't think I have actually. No. Never. I've never saw them go.
You hear the classic horror stories now and again, but it's very...
Yeah, but then again, if they're evicting their tenant with the horror stories, it's because they're not paying their rent.
Yeah,
well, that comes under Section 8.
That's the legal process we just spoke about, which can take...
Exactly. Antisocial behaviour, breaching their tenancy agreement. So when you actually break it down and look at it in context, then as I said, it's not actually that bad. So what I would say is it's not as scary, but let's see how Section 8 is put into practice, how they deal with the sort of court proceeding side of things, because that'll be the one thing that will sort of make or break how landlords perceive it. If landlords go, well, actually, no, you got a point there. Yeah, that's all right. As long as you're going to do what you're saying there, absolutely fine. So that's what I think we'll see. But to me, it's not the end of the world. On to the next one then. So no more fixed term tenancies. So what this means is you'll no longer be able to tie tenants in for like 6 months, 12 months tenancies. It's automatically going to be periodic. So this is a rolling month-on-month basis. So what this is aiming to do for tenants...
Pay as you go.
Pay as you go. Yeah, pay as you go. So this is going to give tenants the flexibility to give notice whenever they want. So from what they're saying, this will mean that they only have to provide 2 months' notice to their landlords for them to be able to leave. So this was, again, something that some landlords have picked up on as a bit scary for them. Well, okay, if I'm not fixing them in, my God, this is going to be awful. And at the end of the tenancy, usually you could go, actually, no more. We're not going to renew it. Then you can give them notice. So again, it gives the tenants that security there. So any attempt by landlords, according to the bill, to enforce a fixed term tenancy or serve a notice to quit could result in a fine from the local authority. So they're already setting up repercussions if you were to follow this. So the revised Section 8, so this is what we're talking about, how they revised in Section 8, allows landlords to give 2 months notice if they wish to sell, as I mentioned, or occupy their rental property. Well, that was already in place anyway. And notice periods for grounds like antisocial behaviour or rent arrears will continue to vary, or they'll be in place still there as well. So yeah, again, I mean, look, there's no fixed term tenancy, so security or tying tenants in for a period of time, 12 months is what some landlords do like. That's out the window. And again, you can't say, well, you've had your term now, you have to leave. So what would be your take on this side?
Yeah, I think we actually highlighted it before coming in, Toby, when we were having a chat briefly. But I think if we're looking from an, I guess, a landlord's perspective, they might be quite concerned by this, just thinking in terms of anyone can just up and leave, and from a landlord's perspective as well, thinking I've got to maybe pay the management agency once again.
Yeah.
Obviously, if a tenant's just left and you've just got someone in, they've just done all the checks, etc. So I can see why some people would have had the uproar. Once again, I think if your property's to a good standard anyway, that I believe there's no reason why a tenant, unless it's for a circumstance like they need to move location or whatever reason, then why would they leave if it's going to be kept in a good condition and you're a good landlord? I think as a whole, I actually personally think as a whole, you don't really tend to. I mean, I for example, had a 6 month tenancy on mine, and it's just about to go over that. And the tenants have had no problems, no issues. They haven't wanted to. And I know a lot of friends who are landlords as well. And it tends to, even if there's a 6 or 12 month, it seems to be a thing where they continue to stay in there for a much longer period of time. I know you mentioned, I think that you've had someone in there for over 2 years, and initially it was a 6 or 12.
Yeah, so I mean, I've had one guy in one of our properties for, he must have been there, God, maybe 6-7 years now.
And what was that initially, a 6 or a 12?
I think that was just a 6 month, tenancy agreement. I could be, I could be wrong there. Maybe about 5 years, but 5 years he's been there. And then there's the other one in Leeds where it started on a 6 months, and they've just renewed, and they've been there ever since we've actually owned the property, which is, I want to say, about 4 years. No, maybe about 4 years now.
So I think it shows a lot of the time that tenants in general, even though the 6 or 12 months, which has been previously a thing and still is anyway for the time being, is definitely something that I think for landlords, you think that's your security. That's where people feel secure. You haven't got to worry about it for at least 6 months. That's the contract set in place. So as I said, I do understand it, but I think as a lot of tenants will do anyway, is a lot of the time they'll look to stay there long term.
I think people are focusing on a small factor like, oh my God, it's rolling. I've got no security for 6-12 months, or I can't, after that part of the agreement's up, I can't sort of get them out at that point, etc., etc. But look, realistically, tenants don't want to be up and moving every few months. They're not realistically going to be.
I'm sure people that have listened have moved house and they know the stress.
Yeah, I think they know the cost involved. So again, they have to get a new deposit together and sort of to move into the next property. That the cost of moving, etc. It's not cheap. It's hassle. No. They're not going to be sitting there after 3 months and went, oh, we've been here a few months. Should we go somewhere else? And should we try down the road? I still own a house there. Should we just pop down the few streets and we're not tied in here.
Removal company back out.
We're not tied in here. Let's go down the road. It's realistically, it's not going to be like that. It just again gives flexibility to tenants, and realistically, they're not going to be moving every couple of months. Again, I've had tenants. I've never had tenants less than a year from all of my properties. So again, that's pretty.
No, take it for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's across the board. I don't know many landlords that have tenants moving. Unless there's a valid reason. Maybe they outgrow the property quickly, or maybe they change jobs and they have to move location, which again can happen. So it does give the tenants flexibility there. But look, it's one of those where I think if you focus on the negative and look at it from just the headline point of view, like, oh my God, no more fixed tenancies. Some landlords initially would
actually
be panicking.
A good example, actually, I had the tenancy in one of my properties in Liverpool. They moved out of and actually came into the property. Obviously, I've obviously acquired, and the buy-to-let I have, they actually moved out because there was a damp issue that wasn't resolved over and over again. So they actually left because of an issue, and they wanted to actually stay. It was no reason. There was no problem with the property. It's just that the landlord hadn't kept the upkeep of the property and looked after the tenants that were inside. So
yes, the landlord's
they ended up becoming my tenants. So
all for you, because they seem to be serving you very well. On to the next one. I mean, we'll quickly rush through this point because we've already gone through anyway, but it's the change to the grounds for possession, which we've spoken about in previous ones. So they want to make it easier for possession with no section 21, but with that being abolished, they want to make it easier to get it through court. So the landlords will look to have the power to regain possession from antisocial tenants, and that notice period reduced to 2 weeks. As we mentioned previously, regain possession from tenants in rent arrears, as we already know, sell a rental property when they need to, which is definitely a good one to add in, and move themselves or close family into a rental property, which is already in there in the Section 8 anyway. So the next one we'll go on to is no more blanket bans. And when we say blanket bans, this means you can't just put a blanket ban on letting a property to tenants with children or those on benefits. So it's actually going to be made illegal under the Renters Reform Bill. So this is where you would get people say, I don't want housing benefits tenants, and I don't want DSS tenants, which is pretty much the same thing.
Picky landlords, right?
Picky landlords, which again, or tenants with children. So horror stories, sometimes you do get tenants with children. You hear the horror stories, the kids wreck the place. I think it's a bit unfair. I have kids myself, and it's not really that bad unless they're actually taking a sledgehammer and knocking down walls, which I wouldn't expect like a 3-year-old to be able to do. Wear and tear with kids, not the end of the world. And the reason there's been blanket bans from some landlords on tenants on housing benefits or DSS or however it's advertised is because there have been issues with landlords actually getting paid, and usually down to the council's fault with how their pay system is and how it's done, and it has caused issues for some landlords, which isn't actually the tenant's fault. To a degree, in some there is some circumstances where it sometimes is the tenant's fault, but a lot of it, in my experience from being around letting agencies, it's usually the council that cause issues there, and then it puts tenants in arrears. Landlords then aren't receiving rent. If they've got a mortgage, it stacks up, and that put pressure on. So those sort of horror stories have kind of created a blanket ban among some landlords where actually, no, I don't want those. I've heard the horror stories of no. So this is actually going to make it illegal, and they are going to enforce this. So I've got here, so one way they're going to enforce it is they're going to support landlords to make informed decisions on individual circumstances rather than relying on blanket bans. So they're going to help landlords to look at a case by case and make a decision based on that, which is good. They're going to work with the insurance industry to address the landlord and agent misconceptions, as we just spoke about. That one of the misconceptions is that it's difficult to get insurance for properties where tenants are in receipt of benefits. So they're going to do that. They're going to explore improvements to welfare support information for both tenants and landlords, again educating, so that will help to ensure that those who are able to manage their rent payments can arrange direct payments of housing costs to their landlord, which I think is important, through their universal credit. So that will definitely massively help, because sometimes it's not a direct payment, and that's what causes issues for landlords. They're going to boost awareness of the range of local services available to help people who are living on a low wage or receiving benefits. So this is more based around an educational side and sort of implementing a few things there, which will help show that as long as you know what you're doing and it's set up correctly, it's not actually that bad. So my take on this personally is it's that, again, scary headline some people, because you immediately thought the horror stories, but I don't actually think, again, it's that bad. And hopefully I think that will actually help some tenants that do deserve and are absolutely fine and capable of getting rental properties, but are actually told by letting agents, nope, sorry, we don't accept these sort of tenants, which I know it's horrible to hear a lot of letting agents do, and it's horrible. And there's people out there who genuinely need
people away.
Yeah, honestly, they genuinely need good homes, and they are fit for those homes as well. They're absolutely fine, but because
good
of the
people, they pay when they need
exactly.
to.
Misconception is, no, I'm not renting those. Or tenants with children, again, misconception. The horror
Don't
stories.
have kids, guys, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, well, I made that mistake 3 times, so thanks for that, man. So yeah, no, that's my take. And look, again, you're a landlord. What do you think about that?
Similar to yourself, Toby. I'll be completely honest with you. I think, look, I'm all for. I think supplying people with homes and absolutely, if we can help people from a landlord's perspective as well. As I said, I'm pretty sure most landlords, don't get me wrong, not probably everyone, but most landlords, as long as tenants are paying, they're happy to have people in the home. And as I said, a lot of the landlords, which I do think some of the, obviously what they're looking to implement here will help, is the fact of getting the properties up to a certain standard, relaying it back to the point of the damp situation with the Liverpool property, for example, with the tenant, with my tenants, for example, one of my ones there. It just relates to, as long as you're looking after people are going to obviously want to stay in there. And I think, as you said, Toby, there, relaying back to this point is with obviously supplying that, there's so many good individuals out there that unfortunately, because of maybe certain things, they might be restricted as to what they can do,
out of their control.
Properties out of their control, nothing they can do about it. And I think it's quite sad actually.
Yeah, I mean, especially like as I mentioned, renting to tenants that have children. Like,
yeah,
I don't see an issue with that. I mean, look, even if you're a tenant and you haven't got children, have mine. Literally, I'll let you have mine. That's how for I am with that proposal. You can have all 3 of my kids, and yeah, there you go. Enjoy. No, but yeah, like you said, it's sad to see, and elements out of tenants' control, I think is unfair. So yeah, I see that as a positive. Some landlords may be looking at that negatively, but I just see it as a positive. As long as done properly.
For sure.
The next one, similar theme about banning certain types of tenants, and that's tenants with pets. So they are now reforming to allow tenants to have pets in property. So tenants, according to the bill, can now keep pets with the consent of their landlord, and landlords can't unreasonably refuse or withhold consent. Now, that does open, again, without knowing the real terms and conditions of that is open to a lot of interpretation. So we have no idea how that's going to play out. What are they going to deem as a reasonable reason for not allowing
What's
a pet?
the size of the pet?
What's the size of the pet?
What kind of pet is it?
Well, I was saying to you, like, what pet is it? If it's a hippo, I'm gonna have to come check the house out, make sure that the hippo's nice, and meet the hippo, make sure it's friendly. But yeah, exactly, it's open to interpretation there, and tenants will also have the right to challenge a refusal as well. So again, what does that entail? What does that look like? Who's going to determine the outcome of that appeal? What process? Who does it go to? How much time is that going to waste?
It's very brief at this point in time, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we don't know the real ins and outs. So we'll see how that plays out. But again,
I'm all for.
Yeah.
I'm all for pets. Yeah, I like pets. So I've always. I mean, of course, don't get me wrong. There's some pets that, if you don't train them properly, of course, it can be a problem. But I believe the normal pets, your cats, your dogs, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah,
it's very, very little issues I've ever found, and I haven't heard. Don't get me wrong. It's like anything. There's always a horror story or two, but majority of the time, once again, I think it's harsh in a way.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand. We go back to hearing horror stories about wear and tear of properties, dogs in the house, big dogs. Oh, they've ruined the carpet or ruined the flooring. But again, what you tend to find, a lot of tenants with pets, they'll be staying there a long time.
Oh, for sure. That's a massive point.
And wear and tear in the property, realistically, if a tenant's staying there for 5 years, if they've got a pet, and when they move out, you need to get a new carpet because the dog's ruined the carpet. Well, after 5 years, as a landlord, really,
you're probably going to be getting a new one anyway.
Yeah, if you want to do it nicely and have good standards for the next line of tenants coming in, you're going to be redoing all that anyway. So, yeah, I'm the same with you. It's not really an issue that I think. And again, it sounds like there will be grounds that you are able to refuse, so we'll see how that comes out. They're also going to allow landlords to require tenants to obtain pet insurance as well, and also the Tenant Fees Act will be amended to allow pet insurance as a chargeable fee, so they'll actually be able to charge that on top. Now, this is something that I spoke about quite a few years ago when we mentioned, or I can't remember when I was speaking about it, about pets. Somebody was saying, oh, I don't want pets. So I said, okay, just charge a tenant a bit extra. Just say, let's cover the cost that I think is going to build up over the time of wear and tear. I'll charge you an extra, obviously reasonable amount to cover that cost. Most tenants are like, yeah, fine, because they couldn't get their property anywhere else because of the pet, and they were happy.
By that point, they're already probably liked the property.
Exactly.
They just want to.
So if you've got that,
I think a massive point actually that you highlighted is tenants with pets will look to stay for a long time.
Yeah. It's gonna be their home. Again, they're not going to want to up and move the pets, especially if you've got cats who get attached to sort of locations. Yeah, realistically, I mean, I don't know the stats, but I'd probably assume tenants that have pets are less likely to move rather than tenants not with pets.
For most people that I know, landlord-wise, for sure, I think nearly everyone that's had tenants with pets in there seem to stay a lot longer from my yeah, from what I've definitely heard within friends and a few people I know within the industry.
Next one then. Decent homes standard. So this is addressing, which we've actually heard quite a lot about in the news recently. So this addresses the issues of poor property standards to ensure better living conditions for renters. So we've seen stories about obviously that tragic child that died due to damp issues from a negligent sort of landlord in that sense. So you've got existing measures such as smoke alarms, CO2 detectors, the Homes Act 2018, minimum energy efficiency standards, but they are considered as insufficient for making the standards up to scratch for tenants. So the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, so he's emphasises, the one thing he's saying, he's really sort of pushing the need for better properties and standards to push away the bad properties that have the risk of unsafe, cold, damp properties, wherever it may be, and he wants to push the standards up. So the implementation of the decent home standard would help address the estimated 12% of UK rental properties that pose risks to tenants' health and safety. So really looking to push that up, and local councils will have increased authority to enforce the decent home standard and take action against non-compliant landlords. So yeah, again, I don't see any issue with that.
No, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think landlords within the UK, I think if you're a landlord and you're doing it as a property investment, I think you should always look after. I think if you're a genuine people person, you want to look after people. I think in terms of that's the absolute minimum. Obviously, I know I touched on it slightly already, but referring back to even my tenants in my property right now, they, as I said, came from a situation where they had to leave because of the damp, and it wasn't an issue that was getting resolved. So, and obviously, as you mentioned, Toby, the tragic story there, it's something that I think, yeah, as landlords, it should be the bare minimum. I know a lot of landlords will see it as a cost sometimes, which is crazy to think really, but over the long term, it's still going to be a very solid investment, even if you're having to pay a bit of your profits here and there to look after your tenant, which, to be honest, the tenant will probably be a lot happier. Or one, be probably willing to, if you ever increase the prices, be happy with it because they know you have their best interest and you're looking after them. I think two, in terms of that, once again, the longevity, they're going to want to stay longer because of course, you're improving their living conditions and making sure they're looked after.
Yeah, look, you're giving people homes at the end of the day, and they need to be fit for purpose. And yeah, if you're spending money on doing your property up, as long as you do it properly, there shouldn't be any need for you to keep paying money. If there's little bits here and there, then look, get it done. The tenant's living there. That's a human being living there. How would you like to live in a property?
That's what I was going to say. I think if you relate back to yourself, would you be happy living in those conditions? And a lot of the time, especially some of the properties, when we do viewings, etc. Now and again, we've probably come across some absolute
shockers. It's an understatement.
Literally.
Yeah, it is bad, and I'm pleased to see that because I think across the board, this is going to hopefully push out some of the bad landlords. But again, let's see what powers councils get and see the transparency of that, and if they can actually act on that. But we'll see. So time will tell on that. Now, the next one is the implementation of a landlord portal and new ombudsman, so across the board. So it will introduce a single private renters ombudsman for all landlords in England that they would have to be a part of. So make it hopefully more straightforward, and that the role of that ombudsman will be to facilitate dispute resolution between landlords and tenants without involving the court system. So this is how they're talking about making it better and more streamlined. And then they will also have a new property portal which will be implemented, and landlords will be required to register their properties on it. The new portal will provide tenants with more information about the rental property standards and assist local councils in handling disputes. So they're going to go more online, have that platform. So landlords who already use a letting agent benefiting from a mandatory redress scheme will need to join the new one and the online portal once the bill comes into effect. So it's going to hopefully make it more transparent. more even across the board. So one ombudsman that all landlords have to be a part of, so everybody knows where they stand, both from a landlord and a renter's point of view. And then the portal, obviously making it accessible online, more informative, because I think there's not enough accessible information, not easily anyway. It's so confusing.
You have to do your own research, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, hence why letting agents are worth the money that they charge, and they probably deserve a bit more because they make it simplified. They do it all for you. And yeah, they definitely help on that side of things. The good ones, yeah, there are some bad ones. So yeah, again, look, with that one, I think it's good. In theory, great idea. Like the sound of it.
I agree, I think it's good.
Implementation, only time will tell. But that's one of the other things they're looking to bring in. So just do bear that in mind for any landlords or any potential landlords who are looking to invest in property. Next one. So they're going to change how rents are reviewed and change the increase notice period. So they're going to restrict it to one rent review per year, and landlords must provide a notice period of 2 months for any rental increase. So what they want to do is obviously stop the sudden increase and landlords being greedy when they want to be. Some landlords, very small portion of them, being greedy and increasing rents every couple of months if the market's moving well. So yeah, that's what they're looking to obviously bring in the new bill. And what would be your take on that?
I think in terms of that, so in terms of, just to make that simple, in terms of, it would be, I guess they're looking to do one rent review per year. Mm-hmm. So as a whole, I think, look, I mean, it's not often, I think, that people will be looking to raise rents more than once in a year anyway.
Yeah.
So to be honest with you, I don't see this as a huge issue. I think in terms of that, it would have to be a significant amount of growth in 1 year to really want to increase it. And I mean, the only other way I can see, as I mentioned before, I think with yourself before the podcast, Toby, is if you've had, for whatever reason, two tenancies and two people have moved, and the letting agents may be telling you can get a bit more for your money, etc. But look, that's very unlikely to happen. So I would say, yeah, I don't see it as an issue. What about yourself? Do you fairly similar?
Yeah, fairly similar. I mean, the bill's going to include that the tenant can challenge what they perceive as unfair rent increases, which is fair enough, because if you are increasing the rent unfairly, then yeah, the tenant should have the right to.
There's no benefit as such.
Exactly, yeah. And you're not going to be allowed to have a rent increase clause within your tenancy agreement as well. So yeah, look, like you just said, look, rental increases, I've kept mine the same for years prior, and it's only when the letting agent said, well, maybe you should think about increasing it, and again I'm like, okay, but what's a reasonable amount? And I always tend to try, if they're a long-term tenant, I'll always try and keep it under the market rent, because I want to reward them for being a long-term tenant. But yeah, like you said, realistically, you're not going to be increasing it more, sort of any more than a year, and if you are, you're a greedy landlord, or there is some sort of reasoning behind it, which is very rare. So I don't think that's a bad thing. It gives good clarity to the tenant as well, and potentially the landlord, I suppose, because once a year maybe they go, well, let me have a review. Okay, it's fine. I'll leave it, rather than and then knowing they've got to use it wisely as well once a year. So yeah, it's not just getting pushed up for the sake of it, which I think is going to be good. Yeah, and then I think that's everything really to cover on those. Yeah, in terms of the rental increase lastly as well, yeah, I think if you are a landlord hearing that, it sounds, again, like we've noticed, more scary than
it's a recurring theme.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just to round up what we've just gone over briefly, sort of the main points that we've highlighted from the Renters Reform Bill, I think my overall perception of it is it's not as scary as some headlines may make out. Some landlords may be scared by the headlines or the sort of shortened versions of the bill, which make it sound a lot scarier, but it's not. I think it's good for the rental market. It's going to increase standards for tenants. It's going to help tenants out as well. So it is going to benefit renters. I'm not going to lie, it is going to benefit renters, but I think, why not? The stuff they're putting in is not anything that I think is unfair. And all the caveats in there for landlords to be protected to a degree are substantial enough for me not to be scared of the landlord to think, oh my God, this is horrible. They'd be silly to do that anyway, because it would just cause absolute mayhem in the rental market. But this is protection for tenants, and hopefully what they're looking to do as well by some of the changes they're making is give clarity and more substance for landlords when trying to get their property back, or how they then operate their properties. And across the board, the increasing the standard of the rental properties, for me, I think is a massive benefit, and I'm pleased to see that. It frustrates me when I see rubbish properties on the market, or you hear the stories about some of the conditions tenants have been living in, and these landlords get away with it, and then they give the rest of us a bad name, and we're all tarnished with the same brush. Greedy landlords, horrible properties, not fit for purpose, we hate you all.
Landlords getting slated.
Oh God, yeah. And then you can see why they want to leave the market, which is only a bad thing with landlords leaving the market, because it means there's less supply for current renters, which then pushes their prices up, and it's not good for the market. We need more landlords, good landlords to the market to help the market. The supply and demand shift at the moment is still massive in terms of...
I think this will bring in, though, this hope certain parts of it should implement that within the market, and hopefully bring out, as you said, I think it would hopefully phase out a lot of the landlords that are not so much keeping their properties up to the standard that it generally should be. I agree, Toby. And as a whole, I think is that everything that you wanted to cover in this episode?
Yeah, I think on the renters reform bill, that's pretty much all of it. That's the main. Again, if anyone has any questions, always drop a comment or pop us a message. And lastly, what you have to remember, this bill, as I said, hasn't actually come into force yet. They're already U-turning on some of the things. Now, recently there was a scenario where the NRLA and some other bodies have sort of lobbied the government, say, look, you have to be careful with, I think it's the Section 21 abolishment, because with purpose-built student accommodation property, landlords need to get their property back at the end of the tenancy or at the end of the school period, because they need their property back then, and then for the next new tenant. So they've kind of looked at that and said, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to address that, and for student renting and student accommodation, we'll amend that so there's not an issue, and the landlord can get the property back at the end of the school term. So there's going to be stuff changing along the way. This isn't set in stone. This is giving us a good basis and idea, well, a good clear idea on where it's going. So I do foresee more changes along the way, and I think it will won't be finalised maybe for quite a few months to come, and then it's got to come in anyway, which hopefully they should give us enough notice for, which will be interesting.
I agree. I think just to mention there as well, Toby, what you highlighted, I think is a great point in terms of it will give, I guess, a bit more structure and an idea for landlords to, as you said, have an understanding, and also for tenants as well, a massive benefit to them in terms of knowing what their rights are, what they can kind of have a say on, etc. And hopefully, as an overall, make the relationship between landlords and tenants a much better one than maybe what's always seen as not always the best of relationships.
Yeah, you're definitely right there. And I think, look, lastly, just landlords, don't be scared by this. Look into it, get some advice. Don't be scared by the headlines or rumours and what you're hearing. Do your own research. Look into it, as we always say. Look into stuff yourself. Make your own perception. But from our point of view here, we're not worried about it, and we only see it as a positive overall more than a negative. So hope that has been clear for anybody listening or watching this episode. And as I said, any questions, just drop us a message, comment, or email us at info@trackcapital.co.uk. We'll be happy to help. And then, we'll see you next time for the next episode, where most likely with the Home Track report coming out today, we'll cover that, and we'll go over some more headlines. And again, if anybody has anything that they would like us to cover, any questions or headlines or anything that you see that you want us to sort of give our insight to or go over on an episode.
Certain topics.
Yeah, certain topics. Feel free to drop them in. We have sort of have conversations with investors on a regular basis that give us and inspire us to have these topics and conversations. So if you have any direct ones, send them through. We're always happy to go over them. But yeah, I think that's it for today.
Yeah.
All good. So we'll see you next time. All right.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.